What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 8 edition of your Pro Football Focus PFF Fantasy Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Britt Devine. I am back. I hung out with Mickey and Minnie for a nice little week down there in Florida, but back to the football grind with our favorite co-host, Mr. Ian Hartitz of Pro Football Focus. Ian, dude, I missed you. I heard, you've been getting some grief on these helicopter plays. I disappear for a week and you smash it, dude. What's up? I mean, why can't this happen when I'm on the show?
Funny how things work out, but no, it's a couple variables last week. One, you weren't here, and two, we did change the selection process for a little bit, as we were talking about a little bit before the show. Had that week 6 come around where it's like Jefferson, Swift, Julio, they all smashed, and they were all they all projected ownership over 5% because pretty much any like semi-decent play does these days. So we adjusted the system a little bit, still not taking top 5 salary guys or anyone with ownership above 10%, but I do think the newer system is going to lend itself a little bit more kindly in this little fun competition we've made for ourselves.
Yeah, I do the Millionaire Maker review articles for RotoGrinders for premium members, and last week the most chalk that's ever hit, the highest average ownership combined of all the top 10 lineups, was the highest it's been in 3 years of me doing this, right? The chalk smash last week, and it's a new NFL. There's more scoring. The good quarterbacks are playing really well, and we're using them in our lineups, and it's just making it really hard to find the low-owned plays that do well. There are some here and there. Some of them just sort of come out of the blue. Some of them maybe you could have had a little foresight to use, but yeah, it's a little bit different NFL season DFS wise and even on the field than we've ever seen before. We got to adapt as players. So yeah, I like that because I agree with you. It's getting really tough. The number of low-owned players in winning lineups too, that's 5% or less, it's at its lowest level that it's ever been in 3 years of me doing this. Again, because the good plays are playing better in the different NFL. So I like that you made a little bit of change without me here behind the scenes hawking on you to try to get 5% or below. But let's move on to the the Mismatch Manifesto. I'm angry I missed out on all that stuff last week, but we got the Mismatch Manifesto going here, Ian. You look at a lot of different sort of offensive line, defensive line, pass rates, and all this sort of fun stuff here. I've got the explosive pass rate pulled up here. Let's sort of jump into this. What's going on for Week 8 in the NFL?
Yeah, just so general idea behind the column has always been when we talk about matchups, it's always offense A ranks X, defense B ranks Y, and we're always kind of looking at two different metrics. So the idea here, combine that and get one-way streets for everything. So first of all, as I'm sure we'll talk about throughout the show, we got weather concerns all over the place. Yeah. So keep in mind that this is not looking at weather. That is a separate variable you need to consider. But with that said, Aaron Rodgers and company against the Minnesota Vikings through the air, looking set to smash. We saw them do that in week 1. And, the fact that Rodgers has been so much better at Lambeau throughout his career. I mean, look, they can, if he can zing that thing through the wind, should have, Devontae Adams, maybe even Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Allen Lazard might have a chance to be back this week. So we'll see what happens there. And also we got Josh Allen going against the Patriots. Normally I think we just kind of be fading him immediately, but hey, Stephon Gilmore got this knee injury now. John Brown will be back in the lineup. Not a situation I'd be willing to go to in cash, but could be a sneaky GPP stack there. The Patriots, they've been giving up some big plays through the air this year. They've still been a solid defense, but could be a situation where a fully healthy Bills offense can give them a little bit of a problem. So those are two that really stick out. And then, just other Ryan Tannehill set up pretty well. Jared Goff as well, but Goff doesn't really have the volume. Tannehill battles that too, but at least against the Bengals secondary compared to the Dolphins, Tannehill is someone that, maybe not cash game viable, but, hey, he's a guy's been playing like a top 10 quarterback these last 2 seasons. I think we got to continue to treat him like that this week.
I do want to note, you mentioned the weather. I've got the Roth report pulled up for everybody. This is probably the ugliest weather all combined in one slate that I've seen. Normally we might have 1 win game or 2 win games, and I think there's like 4 or 5 this week. We already had one last night in Carolina, but we got Tennessee at Cincinnati, 20-mile-per-hour winds. New England at Buffalo, cold, rain, snow, high winds. Raiders at Cleveland, rain, 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Minnesota at Green Bay, 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds. New Orleans at Chicago, 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds. The cutoff's usually around 15 miles per hour sustained winds. That's what I've always heard from Kevin Roth. Again, we're recording this Friday afternoon. Always a little tough, right? Are the winds going to be 17 miles an hour Sunday morning, or are they going to be 35 miles an hour? Hard to tell. Just keep that in mind. It's going to be really important to know what's actually going on in the wins, in the pregame shows, and searching Twitter for all this stuff Sunday morning. Because if the wind dies down in that Green Bay game, let's say it's 18-mile-per-hour winds, that's a lot different than 25-mile-per-hour sustained with 40-mile-per-hour gusts. And then that game becomes a lot more attractive. Just keep all that in mind. You're going to need updates Sunday morning, RotoGrinders, all the live shows. Maybe a little plug for myself. I'm filling in on the GPP show 11:20 to 12:20 here on RotoGrinders. You can catch me on that for tournament exposures. And I'll try to have the most up-to-date weather I can get for you guys on that one. But yeah, very, very tough week in the passing game out there, Ian. So if the passing game, if it's not going to look good for a lot of these guys, maybe we can go to a couple things in the run game here. What's standing out in that, maybe in the run game in the trenches?
Yeah, looking at yards before contact, just using this to try to isolate offensive line play, kind of independent of what the running back's doing. But, unfortunately, the Sunday night game, we can't get too far in on the Eagles facing that, just brutal Cowboys defense if you're playing on DraftKings. But, Boston Scott truly treat him as a top 15 back this week, and he is set up to smash with the week's best matchup in combined yards before contact per rush. Also, run games are set up really well. Daryl Henderson against the Dolphins. I guess you can throw Malcolm Brown in there too. Maybe Cam Akers, probably not. Seems like Sean McVay hates him at the moment, but Rams either way are set up well against the Dolphins defense that has been really good, but I think that's more in the secondary with Byron Jones. I think teams are able to run on them, and if Tua has a rough debut, could be a situation where the Rams are playing with a lead for most of this one. And then also the Chiefs versus the Jets stick out as kind of the number 3 best run game matchup of the week. Look, last week, it was a situation where we saw DeAndre Washington play a good amount, but it was all in the fourth quarter of a blowout. This was in the first 3 quarters of the game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 18 snaps, Le'Veon Bell, 17. So, we'll see how long we get neutral game script in this one against the Jets. I think it will be another, blowout induced game. But, as long as this remains a game, I think we can kind of get used to seeing a 50-50 snap split from Clyde and Le'Veon. Okay, it's not going to help Clyde get that top 5 stats we were hoping for, but both these guys can be RB2s with this sort of usage.
Yeah, go add that minus 3,000 to every bet that you make. I don't, whatever little equity is it. I don't think the Chiefs, is there any way, even if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt on the first play, the Chiefs win that game by double digits, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's go to a couple other things. I skipped over them at the start. Pace is something that's always important. I've scrolled back up to it on your sheet for everybody watching live on YouTube. What are the quickest matchups we can expect this week?
Yeah, Cowboys at Eagles, because the Cowboys, it looks like they've decreased the pace a little bit. You would think maybe now that they're down to their 3rd quarterback, they'll really try to change the offense. But again, the fact that, they lost Dak and just really didn't try to change a thing and just tried, to assume that Dalton could kind of bring out the same sort of offense despite the offensive line woes just kind of speaks to the just kind of disastrous coaching the Cowboys have been dealing with all season. But, with the Cowboys still, insisting on moving pretty fast, again, cannot stress enough, fully fire up these Eagles throughout the week. Also had the Titans and the Bengals popping a little bit. Yeah, monitor the weather, man, because the Titans Bengals could be one of these games that we see both offenses putting up plenty of points. Titans, aren't a bad defense, but haven't been great at getting consistent pressure on the QB, and that kind of has been Burrow and that offense's kryptonite. On the other side of the coin, though, we got the 49ers and the Seahawks popping as, the slowest paced matchup of the week. We got 49ers are 32nd in the league. They just do not make a habit of moving very fast. Seahawks don't really do so either. Now, will it really matter because neither of these secondaries can guard the offenses? I wouldn't worry too much about the pace here, but something to keep in mind. And then finally, the Saints at the Bears, another matchup that's kind of popping out as not being all that high pace. You're playing Alvin Kamara still, and maybe Michael Thomas in his comeback, but I think with the Bears and this tougher matchup and just their offense hasn't been doing much of anything lately. You throw in this kind of lower pace, might be a situation to avoid for another week.
Yeah, you got to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, because even though the pace in that San Francisco Seattle game is slow, that's the only game with good weather with a big total,
Exactly.
with a lot of plays we're going to want to use this week. So what's going to win out in the end will be interesting to see how it all plays out. What else do you want to talk about from the manifesto article?
Yeah, quickly looking at pressure, Daniel Jones is going to be under all sorts of pressure that Monday night game against the Buccaneers, and we know how good they've been against running backs as well. So, in that, kind of showdown slate, once we get there, do not be afraid to roster that Buccaneers defense, pretty much any lineup you have. Also, Lamar Jackson against the Steelers. Anyone playing the Steelers is going to be under a fair amount of pressure. I would just note with, this Steelers defense, look, they are great, but I think that Baker Mayfield game sticks sticks out to everyone. Like, they haven't shut down every single passing attack they face this year by any stretch of the imagination. We've seen guys like Jeff Driscoll, Carson Wentz put up over 250 passing yards and throw for multiple touchdowns against the Steelers. So, this is not a matchup where like I'm fading Lamar Jackson as a top 5 QB. I think he needs to be in that conversation any day of the week. Okay, I think with this first half of the season being done, okay, we've kind of realized that Lamar isn't this every week overall QB1 of the QB1s that we grew used to seeing last year. But this guy's still anyone's idea of a high-end QB1 regardless of the matchup. And then finally, yeah, Sam Darnold against the Chiefs, going to be a massacre there. And when Jamison Crowder out, he lost his, underneath option. So not good. If you can pay all the way up to the Chiefs, 4,500, good for you, but going to be rough. And then quickly, I would just note, on one of my favorite charts here is the combined EPA tab. We've been doing a little bit worse than it was the start of the season with getting the overs, when it is two teams both facing positive matchups. It is a 23, 17, and 1 on the season. So if you look at the chart, you can kind of see we got another 9 matchups this week hitting it. So again, don't just blindly do it. Keep in mind the weather, keep in mind the pace, and the matchups and all that stuff. But the matchups that are really popping as just both offenses, setting up well: Vikings, Packers, Titans, Bengals, and then also the Raiders at the Browns. So again, unfortunately, we have weather concerns and all these things, but we really do have a lot of matchups on this slate where both offenses should be able to have their way with the defenses as long as Mother Nature can stay a little bit out of the way.
All right. If you want access to that and more over on Pro Football Focus, you can get that with your Edge subscription over there. Before we jump into our bets, I missed out last week. I want to talk to you guys about the FanDuel single entry series. It's been going on for a couple of weeks, week 6 through 13. So it's been going on since week 6. Don't feel like you've missed out if you haven't played yet. So it's a single entry contest at 3 different buy-ins, 5, 33, and 100. So why haven't you missed out? Because your top 4 combined scores count at each buy-in tier. So even if you missed week 6 and week 7, you still have weeks 8 through 13 to post 4 good scores. And if you happen to do that, you can advance to a $20,000 final on FanDuel. So make sure to check that out. That is in the lobby over on FanDuel. A great way to level the playing field. One singular entry. As much as we like lineup HQ, right? You don't want to play against 150 lineups sometimes. You can do that in the FanDuel single entry series. All right, I want to jump into some bets here. I'll do it pretty quickly. I got 2 for you. And my first one is, it's a lot of things you probably shouldn't be doing, Ian. So you're playing a team from the Monday night game, and they're traveling west to east, right? You probably don't want to do one of those, yellow alone both of them. But I think the Rams going up against Tua in his first game, it's just, I don't know. I think the Rams are a much better team, unless Tua is better than maybe even Joe Burrow is. I think Tua has to be halfway decent in practice, right? He was great in college, but he's got to be showing something for them to bench Ryan Fitzpatrick, because they're not the worst team in the league by a long shot with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. But I just think the Rams they're too good on defense. I think they're going to be able to pose a pretty big problem for Tua and that Miami offensive line. So I like the Rams. I got them at -4 on Monday. It's -3.5. I'm going the wrong way on the line on this one. So if I can get some at 3.5, I like that. And the other one is, I don't know why the Chargers are just 3.5 in Denver, because Denver just stinks. Drew Lock ain't it, and Justin Herbert is. And this is just too big of a matchup differential at the quarterback position to be 3.5. I know the Chargers, they like to charger, but I think Justin Herbert's going to maybe move them out of that realm and turn them into a pretty good team. So those are probably the 2 I'm looking at in this week.
Yeah, Herbert playing some great ball. I like the Rams call, man. I mean, with that defense kind of losing Wade Phillips and stuff, we wondered how they would be this year. But a really good piece on PFF.com by my coworker Seth Galina, where he just kind of really got into the schemes and what they've been doing this year. And this Rams defense, man, is not the matchup that you want to be
the best
facing
in the league.
Yeah, exactly, man. And for that to be Tua's first career start, I mean, to your point, maybe he's been doing good in practice. It seems more like to me they kind of just circled this first game post bye week. So yeah, I think it's gonna, Tua might have a great career, but don't think he's gonna have a great week 8 2020. I like that call. 2 bets I like, went 1-1 last week, hitting the Panthers +7.5. But because the Bills couldn't find the end zone even once, unfortunately the Jets got that cover. So it is what it is. But I like the Colts and Lions over 50. We got no weather concerns inside the dome. And this line's actually moved down a little bit since opening up, which was surprising to see, because Detroit offense, since they got Kenny Galladay back, we were talking about the #1 passing game in the league in EPA per play. Stafford's gotten back to get getting that double-digit average target depth. They're still giving the ball to Adrian Peterson more than any of us would like to see. But, at Rivers and Jonathan Taylor coming off a bye, I think we see the Colts offense, a little bit more of a groove. And again, I don't think really either of these defenses, including the Colts, who I just don't think I've played anybody to this point. I think both offenses are capable of winning their respective matchups. So yeah, give me the over there. And then I really like the Seahawks -3. 49ers defense, it reminds me of kind of like the Broncos to an extent where, they're so well coached that they're still, performing pretty well in certain matchups. But we've seen them. They went up against the Dolphins and then flashes of those Eagles and Rams games where they're facing, more or less real NFL offenses, and results haven't quite been as good. So, credit to the 49ers defense for playing hard. It's been great to see Jason Barrett back there making big plays, but they're so banged up, and I just don't think they can hang with, truly the league's most explosive passing offense right now. So, you take away Debo and Mostert from Jimmy G. I know the Seahawks probably can't slow him down, but at some point, like Jimmy G, he's the definition of a system quarterback right now, and the system is losing a lot of its parts. So I'm not so sure he can keep things humming. And again, anyone's idea of a tough matchup, 3 just seems a little bit soft to me. I'm fine riding with Russ and company.
I like both of those as well. All right, before we jump into the positions, I want to mention to you guys, if you are new to RotoGrinders Premium, if you've never subscribed before, if you see Gridiron IQ on my screen and you see it light up like a Christmas tree, if you hear us talk ownership, if you want to make multiple lineups, if you want to read my Millionaire Maker article and you want to get access to all this stuff on RotoGrinders, I'll give you $5 off your first week. You go to rotogrinders.com/media/PFF. So instead of $39.99, you'll get it for $34.99 for your first month. Save a couple of bucks, $5, throw that in the FanDuel single entry series, right? Take that down and thank me later on that too. So if you're ever looking to check out RotoGrinders, a little discount savings for you. All right, let's talk some plays here. I want to note real quick, while we've been doing this show, we've got Aaron Jones basically not going to play. He did not practice today. Looking like we're going to get another week of Jamal Williams and Stephon Gilmore. You mentioned him. He wasn't spotted at practice today. I'm gonna imagine they hold him out. There's talks they might trade him too. No reason for him to risk an injury. So those are a couple little things that we got as we progress through the show. The Aaron Jones one, probably the one that's going to appeal. We get to run it back again with all the plays that worked last week. They cost more, but I think we could still do it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, man. That's going to kind of enable us, I think, to pay up here at the QB position. We're on the same page at QB and cash. Get up to Russ because, there's just so many weather concerns elsewhere. It's like maybe you can go all the way down to Jimmy G at a 5,400, but, I think I would rather do that in tournaments, man. If you can find a way to get that Russ Metcalf Lockett stack, in your cash games, I just think you got to try to do it. Again, 49ers, not a bad defense, even though they've had all these injuries, but you need a juggernaut defense to try to slow down this Seahawks passing game, and that's not what the 49ers are at this moment. So with you on Russ and cash. And then, I would just say about Jimmy G, no Debo, no Mostert is concerning, but I mean, the Seahawks just truly have given up more, receiving yards to the wide receiver position all year. Kyle Shanahan versus this defense, he might be able to just scheme Jimmy G into 3 touchdowns regardless. So it's so funny, just the type of yards that we see Jimmy G pick up. A league high 69% of his passing yards have been on yards after the catch this season. And I think Dwayne Haskins is the only other guy even over 60%. So maybe it's just like my inner, just kind of, being a football guy at my core, that I see the way Jimmy G's picking up these yards and I'm kind of hating on him. But you know what? In fantasy football land, we don't care how the production gets there as long as it does come. And, he did show off, a heightened ceiling last year we haven't quite seen yet. So Russ and cash, Jimmy G and tourneys.
Yeah, you had a nice statistic on that Jimmy G stat right there. But I got a couple more for you on the Seattle defense because we're stealing each other's plays. I think Russ is the play if you can get to him. We always want to pay down at quarterback because we want the skill position players, but quarterbacks have been winning weeks too, right? We saw that with Kyler Murray, and these guys are popping off for 35s and 40s. 20 ain't cutting it anymore. But I do like Jimmy G. Seattle. You look at all the grades, the team grades on PFF. I like looking at this stuff instead of individually. Wraps it all up as a team. They are second in rush D grade. What do the 49ers want to do? Run. So that's strength for strength. So maybe that doesn't work. But on the pass side, they're 31st team grade in pass rush, 14th in coverage. So maybe they can cover, but they can't get to the quarterback. And Seattle's allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're 30th in DVOA, 28th in adjusted sack rate. I mean, he's going to have time. That's not really Jimmy G's thing, but he's going to have time to throw. You got Kittle, Ayuk. They can get those little, 5-yard dump offs, turn them into 20-yard passes. Kendrick Bourne ain't like he's good. I think Kendrick Bourne's pretty good. Don't sleep on him. He's cheap this week too. That's where I'm going to be looking at quarterbacks. And for tournaments, I don't know if Devin's got the helicopter play tuned up from last week, but I'm stealing it from you. I'm going back to Justin Herbert.
All right.
Because he's good, and the Broncos stink, and nothing really on the defensive side stands out on the matchup, whether you look at PFF or Football Outsiders or Gridiron IQ. I just think he's good, and I think he's got really good receiving targets. Keenan Allen is way too cheap too, so you can stack with that. Maybe you want to not use Keenan Allen all too much, but I still think he's in store for a pretty good game. And his ownership is low. I think ownership is going to be relatively spread out, but I don't think Herbert's going to be where it's going to go. So I like him in tournaments. Just there's all these weather games, and this one doesn't have any weather concerns. So I'm looking at it as a place to go in tournaments this week.
Yeah, I like that call. And, everyone's so heavy on Keenan Allen. Don't be afraid to go back to Mike Williams. He's not going to just dud every single game of the year. We know what he can do when he does get the ball. Obviously, Keenan is their undisputed number one when he's out there. But, to your point, Herbert's going to put up numbers. They had Virgil Green go out. He's throwing touchdowns to backup tight end. So at some point, their big-bodied monster of an outside receiver, Mike Williams, is going to be the guy hauling in those dimes from Herbert.
All right, if I give you the contested catch team, it's Mike Williams, it's Kenny Galladay. Who's going to be rounded out in the slot for us?
My guy Auden Tate.
Tate, all right,
give him some more reps.
Put all those three on the same team for us there.
Incapable of making a boring catch, as I like to call it.
Because he's so slow, he gets no separation.
Hey, none of that. None of that.
All right, let's go to running backs. Well, real quick, anything else at the quarterback position you want to talk about?
Nah, I think that about sells it. Okay, actually, real quick though, I do think the weather concerns are so brutal, but I mean the fact that Derek Carr is priced at 5,500. I mean, come on, Nick Foles is more expensive, Rivers and Cousins. I mean, Carr even came out and said like the new identity of this Raiders passing game is throwing downfield. It's wild. We have seen for so many years the reluctance to throw downfield. It's never been about talent with Carr, and that's what's made him so frustrating. It's that the guy won't throw downfield because when he does, it's beautiful. But newfound passing upside. Carr already has 5 games this year with 250 plus yards and multiple scores. He only had 4 such games all last season, only 3 such games in 2017 and 2018. So, Ruggs, Aguilar, Waller. Hey, if by some grace that the Mother Nature can get those windy balls just into the hands of those Raiders receivers, I'm not sure the Browns can slow down this passing game. The Chiefs sure couldn't.
Yeah, I just think the game really suits Darren Waller. You got Henry Ruggs running all the clear outs and those little 5-yard dump offs to Darren Waller on the win. That sounds really good to me. So I think he's a really nice tight end play. Let's go to running back. I think the stone cold cash lock of the week is going to be Kareem Hunt. I looked at like 4 different data sources: Gridiron IQ, PFF, Football Outsiders, all this fun stuff. And it's literally the best possible matchup you can have in the world. And then you factor in the weather too. When you see the wind and the rain, it gives, the defenses play a little tighter, but it's more opportunities for the running backs. So you've got Kareem Hunt coming in here. The Raiders are allowing the second most fantasy points per game to running backs, the highest percentage of targets in the league to running backs. They're 22nd in PFF's rush team grade, rush defense grade as a whole. And news alert, the Browns, the number 1 run graded blocking offense per PFF this year. The Raiders defense is horrible everywhere, so there's plenty of ways to score. Hunt can get in the end zone 2-3 times. He's the full workhorse role, 92% of the snaps last week. The stone cold lock. You pair him up with, we're going to have Jamal Williams, we're going to have Gio, we're going to have a lot of, you can pay up for Kamara or Derrick Henry. There's a lot of ways to go, but the guy I'm building around this week is going to be Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, and hopefully, you all tuned in last week and when I gave you Hunt as the cash game play and just noted that, he is the workhorse running back. He just hadn't quite had the role to begin with because of fourth quarter cramps and the blowout. So, yeah, Kareem Hunt, stone cold cash lock. I'm with you. Again, no one played more snaps than him last week. So if you can get Hunt in there, that's great. At some point, though, if you are going with the Seahawks stack, you're going to have to find some room to pay down. I think Myles Gaskin represents just about the cheapest cash game running back that we can kind of get behind here. He is the early down, pass down, and goal line back now, especially that Jordan Howard is remaining a healthy scratch, or at least has been over the last 2 weeks before their bye week. So, going to Tua seemingly won't help, but I don't know if it's really going to change Gaskin's just overall, touch ceiling or floor. We don't really know. There's a little bit of uncertainty there, but I mean, the fact he's sitting there at 5,200 as someone that we should project, to probably finish with 20 touches, just a situation where I think he is just far too cheap than he should be. I mean, I get it, going with Jamal and Gio and everything, but Gaskin's the good amount cheaper than all of them. And I think, he has a pretty similar touch projection. Not a great matchup against the Rams, but defenses don't matter, running backs don't matter. We're just kind of going with the volume play here. Would also note Jamal Williams. I just, if you got the $400 to get up from, $300 to get up from Gio and Jamal, I would. We just, we have such a higher just faith in this Packers offense than the Bengals as a whole. Burrow been playing some great ball, but these rookies, there's going to be a floor game at some point from him and Justin Herbert alike. I don't know if this matchup is necessarily going to be the one, but I think there's a lot more safety with Jamal Williams than Giovanni Bernard. With GPP, I would just say that, to your point about Kamara and Henry, always being viable cash game lines, it might be causing Dalvin Cook to be going a little bit under the radar this week. Back in action, we've had Gary Kubiak say that, they're not expecting to have a pitch count on him. And the Packers have allowed more fantasy points per game to the running back position than any other defense to this point. So, if you do want to pay up and get Dalvin Cook, we are looking at someone that's going to have, 15 to 20 carries and hopefully 5+ targets as well. And that's just kind of on the low end of things. He's always a threat to just completely blow up and win the slate. So Dalvin Cook, whenever he's, even a little bit under the radar, I think we need some viability there. And then quickly, Melvin Gordon at 5,600. If Philip Lindsay is eventually ruled out, he's going to play a featured role. I know it's a little bit icky to play Melvin Gordon, but we got a volume-induced revenge game. If he falls into the end zone twice, won't be the worst thing. And then finally, before I shoot it back to you, Britt, don't sleep on these Chiefs running backs. I think just because that, we do have Clyde now splitting things with Le'Veon, people are a little bit afraid that, we don't have that kind of same top 5 ceiling. But I mean, through 3 quarters last week, it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 18 snaps, and then Le'Veon Bell was at 17. So, DeAndre Washington got in there in the 4th quarter, but split backfield, 3 touchdown favorites against the freaking Jets, man. Like, there's no reason why Clyde and Le'Veon can't, find the end zone, maybe flirt with those triple-digit yards. So, maybe the ceiling isn't as high as we wanted, but particularly with Le'Veon, man, I think, it's certainly a viable play this week.
I think I saw Bell's even money to get a touchdown today. Which side, John?
Sign me up, man. Andy Reid seems like a cool guy. He knows what's going on.
He does. We're stealing each plays. Maybe we're gonna have a good week this week, because I definitely like Dalvin Cook. And this goes to sort of, I guess, your Colts, Lions over. The teams off the bye week, we forget about them. We're like, they weren't around last week. And Dalvin Cook, he's definitely going to be under-owned for his ability to lead the slate this week, in my opinion. So he's someone I would like to get exposure to in tournaments. I think from Henry and Kamara, we'll have to see if Michael Thomas plays or not. I think he probably will. But if Michael Thomas is out, Kamara, Henry is where people are going to go. I like Cook because that's just about as nut of a matchup as you can get with the weather too. I mean, everything just lines up for him in that one. I won't steal the other guy. I'll let you talk about him a little bit later on the copter play, so I won't mention the name at this point in time. All right, I'm going to go to wide receiver. A couple of things. Hello, wide receiver pricing guy at DraftKings. Why is Keenan Allen $6,200? I don't know what's going on here. His last 3 healthy games, 13, 11, 19 targets from Patrick Mahomes 2.0 and Justin Herbert. How is he? He should be $7,000 in my opinion. Like Kareem Hunt, stone cold lock, cash game running back. Keenan Allen, stone cold lock, wide receiver on DraftKings. How can you pass? You can't pass that up.
It's wild, man. You had me confused for a sec asking hello there, but yes,
no, not to you. I'm talking to DraftKings.
It's the single biggest pricing discrepancy on the entire slate. I'm with you there. And he is, him and DeAndre Hopkins are the only 2 wide receivers in the league with a target share over 30%. Obviously, Cardinals on a bye, so we truly can project Keenan, I think, for the most targets on this entire slate. I would just say, if you do need that one slot in your lineup to try to save some money, we do have some viable guys at 3,500 or below on DraftKings at wide receiver. Darnell Mooney, if Allen Robinson is going to be ultimately ruled out, which it looks like he is, hasn't been able to practice all week, still in the concussion protocol. Mooney at 3,500. He's had literally 3 potential 50-yard touchdowns just overthrown over these past few weeks. He's putting Jalen Ramsey and Carlton Davis on skates. The guy's legit good. Now, playing with Nick Foles, is always going to be, a struggle. And then that Saints defense, I think, could be able to pressure him. So, again, there's a reason why he's priced at 3,500, but gives you, at least a shot. And then Denzel Mims at 3,200. Crowder looks like he's going to be out after, re-aggravating his groin in practice. So Mims was out there, most targeted guy last week. And with Brashad Perryman, I got to check on that, but I think he's banged up. Okay, cool. Yeah. Mims is just going to get, 8 to 10 targets, and we got to respect that in Fantasyland for just 3,200. And then finally, Kendrick Bourne at 3,500 might be the chalkiest of the 3. I'm not so much on him.
Bourne's the guy people are playing in cash, I think.
Yeah, I'm not so much on him. The guy I want from the 49ers in cash and tournaments alike is Brandon freaking Ayuk. And I'll talk about him a little bit more in the chopper plays, but just realize when Deebo Samuel isn't there, they pretty much turn to Ayuk as their kind of Swiss Army knife wide receiver that gets some actual run as an RB with those carries. He had 4 carries for 69 yards and a pair of rushing touchdowns in in 3 games, 2 of which Deebo was completely sidelined. So a situation where I think Ayuk, you take away Mostert, you take away Debo. I think on Kyle Shanahan's play sheet, Kittle's obviously always the number 1 playmaker, but I think Ayuk is probably going to be the guy he wants to get the ball to the most after Kittle. So I love those guys. And then finally, last 2 plays before I send it back to you. Marquise Brown at 6,100. Another guy coming off the bye and against the Steelers defense that I mentioned before, they're great, not trying to take anything away from them, but we've seen Darius Slayton, Travis Fulgham. We've seen receivers put up really big games against them. And Marquise Brown, one of these guys continuously popping into air yard market shares. At some point, Lamar and him are going to get on the same page with these deep shots. And then finally, Jarvis Landry at 5,600. To your point about Waller, being able to kind of get those lower underneath targets in the wind, I think Landry could be the same way with the Browns working out of the slot. He's going to be their number 1 receiver now. I know everyone's kind of talking about Rashard Higgins and his newfound role, and that's great. But the biggest thing with OBJ being gone is now Landry is the undisputed top guy in this passing game. So, definitely more of a GPP play. Wouldn't trust him in cash with that weather. But I do think, this is a very winnable matchup for a guy that he's playing banged up, but now might have the volume to overcome it.
All right, I'm going to go real deep on my first GPP sleeper. He's playing the only game in a dome, popped off 2 weeks ago. He has been forgotten. Probably don't know who he is, but he's Marcus Johnson of the Indianapolis Colts. He's going to be under 1% owned. I think Bourne, Mooney, and Mims, those guys are all going to, Bourne specifically is going to be well over 10%. The other 2, well over 5% in my opinion. You can get a 1% on play in a dome in a game you like the over in. Sounds pretty good if you're looking for somebody. I mean, it's Zach Pascal. It's the ghost of T.Y. Hilton. These guys just, I don't know. Maybe it's Marcus Johnson. I think he's minimum price on DraftKings. Saves you a couple of bucks too. So that's
like that call a lot.
Ultra deep sleeper. If you want a little bit more known quantities, I got AJ Green. All those AJ Green buy low model air yard haters thinking he was dust. I mean, he could be dust, but he's still putting up fantasy points. I don't know with all the weather in there, he's in there, but I think he's like 4,500. He's too cheap on DraftKings. And when you're getting all these targets, because Burrow is he's chucking the ball. They don't have Mixon to run. Gio's not a workhorse running back. They're going to chuck the ball around the yard. So take a look at AJ Green. I think he's pretty interesting. And then Mr. DraftKings pricing guy, Deontay Johnson. He won tournaments last week. He won tournaments earlier in the year. He's getting 10 plus targets in every game he's healthy, and he's $5,500 on DraftKings, and nobody's going to roster him again this week against the Ravens. Take a look at him. I know you mentioned Marquise Brown. Sounds like a fun little stack to put together there. So those are a couple guys I'm looking at the wide receiver position. You like all those? AJ Green's probably the one I'm most hesitant on simply because of the weather, but I mean, Burrow's going to throw the ball like 50 times in that game. So they got to go somewhere.
Yeah, I'm pissed I didn't think about Marcus Johnson myself. He's been a good field stretcher for them, even dating back to some of the later weeks in last year. They trust him for that. And this is why T.Y. Hilton, we just can't even, he's below 5K this week, but Marcus Johnson is a field stretcher. They prefer throwing their tight ends or even Pascal in the red zone. So I don't even know what that leaves Hilton with. Now he's not even getting
he's their tight end.
Friendly. It's been disgusting, man. But yeah, but AJ Green, it's interesting. It seems like Burrow made a conscious choice where he was like, you know what? AJ Green is not running past anyone. Instead of trying to throw these, vertical routes and trying to lead them, I'm just going to throw it back shoulder every single time. And it's been working because, AJ Green still got that size, man. The size hasn't gone anywhere with the age. So, he's still not AJ Green from 3 years ago, but they're treating him like the number 1 wide receiver still. And, if he's getting 10 plus targets in a, winnable matchup, then yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go. Actually, real quick before we go to the tight end position, don't forget, if you are looking to save a couple bucks on your first time RotoGrinder subscription, you can save $5. You go to rotogrinders.com/media/PFF, Pro Football Focus, PFF. If you've never signed up before, it will save you $5 off your first month. So if you're looking at ownership, Gridiron IQ, or want to read any of the premium articles here, you will be able to do so. All right, I'm going to let you chat tight ends for cash and tournaments real quick. I've got a tournament tight end. I haven't really figured out who I'm playing on cash in at tight end yet. It's probably going to be the last position I fill out this week.
Yeah, I think if you just want to give yourself a little more of a ceiling floor, Jonnu Smith at 4,100 seems a little bit too cheap. He got injured 2 weeks ago, but came back last week, played 70% of the snaps. Didn't get much. He had under 10 receiving yards because they played the Steelers, and just ended up being a different game. But he's still out there, 7% snaps, and he's not even on the injury report this week. So expecting Jonnu to be out there in his normal role. We always know he's a threat for multiple touchdowns. And again, in this matchup where could see a lot of points being put up if Mother Nature cooperates, I'm fine getting pieces of this Titans offense. And then also with Austin Hooper being declared out, Harrison Bryant at 3,200 is still just a little bit too cheap.
3,200. I don't understand that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm fine going back to hopefully you tuned into our Sunday morning game day show. I was a guest on it with RotoGrinders last week, where we did go ahead and tout Harrison Bryant ahead of David Njoku. So keep going back to I love David Njoku. I would love to see him get a chance, maybe in Houston or something down the road. But Harrison Bryant is definitely the preferred option as long as Hooper remains sidelined. Mentioned Darren Waller before as potential GPP guy with Carr. I also think Hawkinson is someone that we should keep an eye on. It hasn't been like a blow up game from him yet, but the guy keeps finding the end zone. It seems like the Lions really do know what they have in Hawkinson, and that is one of the league's top 5, top 8 most talented tight ends if you really want to get down to it. So I think again, sneaky potential shootout, Lions Colts. Let's just get as many guys as we can from these games that aren't going to have 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Lions Colts and maybe Titans Bengals do apply.
Yeah, I definitely want Kittle if you can get him, but I don't think it makes sense to spend $7,000 in a cash game on your tight end position. I'm probably in that. Darren Waller's probably the guy. I do like him to catch some passes against Cleveland. The Noah Fant, Hunter Henry tier, but I do want to talk Hunter Henry for tournament specifically. I liked Herbert as my GPP quarterback. Keenan's going to be the highest owned wide receiver of the week. So Hunter Henry gives you a little bit of leverage off of that. I think it's a good stack with Herbert. And I think you mentioned the Chargers tight ends, they caught 2 touchdowns last week. How many times are Chargers tight ends going to catch 2 touchdowns and Hunter Henry doesn't have a big game? And Virgil Green, he's done, I believe, right, with that ankle for at least a couple of weeks. Yeah. So I think Hunter Henry is going to be in there. Go back to basically an every snap player this week. They were rotating Parham and Virgil Green in there, probably a little bit too much for my liking. But with Green out, I think Henry probably going to play 90% of the snaps, if not higher. And I think he's a nice little tournament play. We currently have him at 6.7% projected ownership. Always a little tough looking at this stuff on Friday. It becomes very, 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 very accurate on Sunday morning when Jamino runs through his final ownership stuff. And if you ever want ownership and you're a premium member, there's the ownership show. It comes out on like Saturday. It's with him and E. Scott. And this is like one of my favorite shows on RotoGrinders. So if you ever have a chance to check that out, it is for premium members, but they basically go back and forth debating ownership and plays and all this stuff. One of my favorite shows. So 2 thumbs up to those guys. All right. I think it's the time. You want to skip defense? Or you got any defensive takes?
Just quickly, I think going Kareem Hunt and the Browns at 2,600 probably makes the most sense for a cash game stack. Derek Carr doesn't make a habit of turning the ball over, and he's usually pretty good at getting the ball out of his hands and not taking sacks. But with the weather potentially changing all that, I do think they're viable. And then also I would say Green Bay at 2,900. They got Darius Smith, Jair Alexander, a bunch of blue chip talents out there if they haven't quite come together yet. And Kirk Cousins, as we know, always has that 3 interception game in his range of outcomes. So I do think it's a week where you shouldn't have to worry too much about spending over $3K to get your defense.
Yeah, I do want to note real quick. I haven't done a study on this. Maybe if you guys subscribe to the Blitz, go ask Derek Hardy in there, or maybe I could just ask him. But the really huge wind rain games, the teams can just run the ball so many times that you think you want defenses in those, but just be a little bit careful on them. I'm gonna have to find out from Cardi if that's true, because if they only throw the ball 15 times because it's impossible to throw the ball in 40-mile-per-hour winds and rain, there's just limited opportunities for interceptions and sacks. And sure, you can get a couple of fumbles and you return one of those, you're looking smart, but sometimes that can reduce passing opportunities. So just keep an eye on that. Maybe I'll ping Cardi to find out some stuff on that for you. All right, let's get to the chopper plays of the week. Ian, I'm holding you accountable because it was 0-6 while I was on?
0-6, but who's counting?
And you went 1-0 the week I take off here. I'm expecting a good play here when the helicopter drops on Twitter Saturday night or whenever it is. Give the people the rundown of who's in contention.
Let's get it, man. Again, as always, can't have a top 5 price tag, can't have projected ownership above 10%. So the 4 guys I really like this week, Darrell Henderson at 5,900 going up against the Dolphins. It's a nice pivot off of Jamal Williams and Giovanni Bernard. And look, it's another guy that we're going to see get 15 plus touches. It's annoying to see Malcolm Brown remain as involved as he has, but with Cam Akers just being an absolute goose egg, it's not like we have Sean McVay coming out after these, most recent games saying like, oh, I know it's, brutal having been able to get Cam to touches. He's just saying pretty much that, it's not in the flow of the game and they don't feel like, they were able to get him the rock. So it's truly Henderson, Brown, with Henderson being, the lead guy and looking like the best running back with the Rams. So the Dolphins much stronger against the pass, with Byron Jones and that good secondary. And then the run also dealing, with some injuries. They got Guy potentially out on the defensive line. So if that first start goes south, I think this would be plenty of positive game script for Henderson and Brown to get, plenty of touches. If Henderson's able to find his way in the end zone once or twice, we will be talking. So, and then also sticking with the running back position, James Conner at 6,400. So last week, he was looking like a pretty good pivot. And I think people, if you just look at the box score, you feel kind of burned about it. But man, he had a touchdown catch nullified. He dropped another one. He got down twice inside the 2-yard line, I believe, on rushes. So it's pretty close to having a helicopter worthy game last week in his own right. But the big thing for me, man, it wasn't those missed opportunities. It was actually the usage because low key going into last week, Connor, I was kind of calling him a potential sell high candidate because he wasn't getting that same every down snap role, wasn't quite as involved in the receiving game. We saw that change a little bit last week. He got back over to 80% mark, had, I believe, 5 targets, at least 4. So it looked more like his 2018 workload. I realized Kareem Hunt, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be maybe a little bit chalkier, but Connor very well could lead the way in touches and being, at a cheaper price point than those guys. Kenny Galladay at 6,600, not going completely under the radar, but I feel like the last few weeks he's been, in cozy matchups, so people have been more willing to get him. And people are looking at this Colts defense now, which is popping with a lot of metrics. So the one metric I will give the Colts a lot of credit on is that they're number 1 in contested target percentage. They're making guys work for it. That's Kenny Galladay's game. I mean, Josh Hernsmeyer with 538 wrote this awesome offseason piece looking at kind of the league leaders and separation and what that kind of does for them. And he pretty much pointed out how Kenny Galladay is like almost the exception to this rule and the guy that is able to continue thriving and be a very efficient player despite, not really getting much separation. Had 6 wild contested catches last week. And again, the Colts are number 1 in that, but I don't think it really hurts him. And just look at the quarterbacks they played this year, man. They faced the Jaguars. They got a bad Kirk Cousins game. And since then, they faced the Jets, Bears, Browns, and Bengals. And Joe Burrow, was able to kind of move the ball up and down the field on them. So I'm not afraid of this matchup. I think the Colts defense is a little bit overrated. And, with a lot of this ownership going to A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, I think the middle 6K range, specifically Galladay, will be flying under the radar. And last one, and potentially my favorite of the group, is Brandon Ayuk. Mentioned before, all these stats against the Seattle secondary. It sounds like Jamal Adams will not be back this week. Either way, I mean, we saw him unable to cover Julian Edelman in the slot all the way back in week 2. Seems like forever ago. With Ayuk, again, he's going to be getting those wide receiver carries with Deebo Samuel sidelined. And he's not this gadget player. Like the routes he was putting on film last week were truly special. I mean, they're confident putting him out there as a true wide receiver and also just giving the ball as a running back. So honestly, he seems more like a cemented, true wide receiver than Deebo, but he can also do his thing with the ball in his hands. So number 2 offensive playmaker in San Francisco. Seems like this, Seahawks San Fran game, as we've been talking about all show, we don't have weather. We got 2 offenses that can put up points. I think Ayuk is able, has the potential 100-yard and 2 touchdown a game and firmly in his range of outcomes.
All right. I like all 4 of those plays. I can get behind every single one of them. So thumbs up on the chopper plays this week. I hope whichever one of the 4 you pick in ends up being the correct choice this
week. You and me both, man.
And we can be 2-6 on the season for you. So that's going to about do it for the PFF show. Happy to be back this week after my week off. Ian, it's been great. I love doing this show. So much knowledge you bring to it. So hat tip to you for everything you do on the PFF pods and all your articles and stuff like that. Thanks to everybody for watching, listening, downloading, wherever you get it from. We appreciate it here at RotoGrinders. I'm Britt Devine for Ian. Thanks for watching, everybody. We out, ya.